G'day, how you doing? I'm Chris, welcome back to my shed. This is Flat Tank Journey, my little bikes. This week I've had a super time. I've only done a couple of days work, but it's been good. I got stuck in and stripped out the gearbox for the Velocette and worked out what I didn't have. And that's really good. I'm really pleased. There's really only one main part missing and I'm on the hunt for that. I'm told it'll be very hard to find. And this could end up being another stalled project. You never know. Also got the engine apart, and that was a good result too. I was pretty pleased. It fought me to the very end, and it required a blowtorch to get it apart, but I did. And I learned something, and the engine, in fact, is better than I expected it to be. So I'm happy about that. I got the seat back for the BSA, and it's had a new cover made for it. And I put it on a bike, and I put the tank on, and I'm pretty pleased with it too. It looks super and I'm looking at it out the corner of my eye. Thanks to everybody who's subscribed since Christmas. Means a lot. 40 new subscribers may not mean anything to the big channels, but it means a lot to me. I appreciate it. In the meantime, enjoy the video. Cheers. Messing with the Velocette motor. A little two-stroker and trying to piece a few things together and trying to get it, well, I've got to get it unstuck. I've actually got to get the barrel off. So the crank comes out this side, I gather. I have no idea how to get this out of there. I assume it's all threaded. So I'm being very careful about that. I gave the manifold a bit of a brush up and found a clamp for the carburetor and got all that put on, and then got a couple of nuts, put it on, and that looks good. And I've just taken the head stud nuts off and I'm going to try and get the barrel off. First off though, I think I'll take the carburetor off because that's got brake me written all over it. But I did find nuts. I did give the threads a clean up. I actually think it needs custom nuts made with a little shoulder on the back that sits into the manifold tightly, because the nuts are extremely close to the manifold sides and they're very hard to do up. And when you look, and I'll show you before I take it off completely, there's a little recess where a round shoulder might sit. A bit like the nuts off a BSA and Sturmy Archer gearbox. You know, those nuts with a little shoulder on the back. Come and have a look and I'll show you what I mean. I'm only guessing, but when you look in the manifold, you can see this little recess. And I think it's got a little shoulder that sits in there and on the back of the nut. It then leaves the nut sit up higher, and the nut would be easier to do up. There's that little clamp I found, was off something else, and I gave the manifold a bit of a wire brush up and it cleaned up really well. In the meantime, I've got the nuts off the studs that hold the barrel on, and I'm going to see if I can get this barrel off. I'm not overly optimistic though. Now, my level of optimism has been met pretty solidly. Now, excuse the fan. I should have said, I've got a fan on in the background because it's warm. Now, just a rubber mallet. Now, I can see it's actually moved. It's actually broken away a little bit. Now it's broken away a bit more. Lots of times when these are stuck, the crank will move because the piston's stuck in the barrel. Yes, I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Why shouldn't I do it? Because I'm going to score the surfaces and then it doesn't seal properly and you need a new base gasket. It's moving though, which is promising. Yeah, baby. Come on. Come on. People now. So the piston is moving in the barrel. So that's a good sign. And the piston's going to come out. You beauty. That is tight. Good Lord. Okay, that barrel's nice and clean. That barrel is nice and clean. Wow. And that crank has no up and down and a tiny bit of sideways. I can call that good. That is good. Wow. All right, better get you off the tripod and you better have a look. Cast iron piston, cast iron rings, super tight, barrel's clean. Could do with a hone and a check of the measurement. Winner, winner. That's better than I thought it was going to be. Let's have a look. There's the piston. Now, weirdly, the top of that piston's been cleaned. Or it ran really clean, I don't know. Rings look okay. They don't look damaged, they're not broken. There's no marks on the piston. The plug is in one side, little brass plug. There's no plug in the other side, which is a bit weird. Wonder if the plug's in the case somewhere. It's not in the barrel that I can see. I don't know whether you can see it, but you can see the barrel's clean. Got a bit of cross hatching on it. A few scores from the past. No, that was oil. So, I don't know, I'm going to call the barrel good. I like that. Could do with a solid clean up, but looks good. Let's push on. To show the piston, there's zero up and down. Well, that's the piston moving. There's a tiny bit of sideways. I'm going to leave that. That's going to be fine. Winner, winner. It is the crank that is locked up though. So let's get you back on the tripod and we'll have a look from there. So the conrod's turning on the big end. It's the crank that is not spinning. Why? Well, I don't know. That's the $1 million question. Rightio. So you can see where people have tapped at this before. So I'm going to have a tap at it as well. Trying to move that case. Because my belief is that that is threaded. I'm just going to get a marker pen. You can see I'm perspiring. It is warm in the shed. I'm going to get a marker pen, mark the inner case and the threaded piece to see if it's moving. And the answer is no. And I really don't want to hit that too hard. I might have to take in some external advice on this and how it works and see what I can work out. Bring you back when I know a bit more. Would it help if I said I had no idea what I'm doing? Inside this crankcase, I'll hold it up for you, are a couple of things. So down here is a little mark where somebody's been having a go at it. And I had a go at it. And then at the top, there's a flat. And it's a bit hard to see. So I've been standing here scratching my head thinking about it. And thinking, well, Mr. Velocette obviously had a tool that he pushed in that locked into that flat. So I've turned one out of wood on the lathe and machined a flat or sanded a flat off the back. Now it fits and it's a tight fit. So what I'm going to do is try and get the engine solidly locked into the vise. Then I'm going to try with a couple of decent screws. These are 8 gauge. Put back in and knock that in hard and try to turn that out with a piece of round bar. Wish me luck. I will set up the camera so you can have a look to see whether this works or fails. I think you can see. I may have to remount this piece of wood because now that's the crank spinning. The crank hasn't spun before, but of course now it wants to spin. I didn't lock up on the bush because I was concerned I'd damage it. So the screws are now starting to fail. They're going to pull through. So I might have to drill some holes and try some bolts. Not sure. Right, I'm in a lather of sweat. I'm going to call my plug failure. Yeah. However, I haven't done any damage to the engine, and that's the main thing. If you wallow away at some of these parts with a screwdriver and a big hammer, you end up with a broken crankcase. And, you know, it's a long time since I've really messed something up that I wanted. I have, however, the crank is free as a bird now. Of course, I sprayed lube in there and tapping away at it has moved whatever was holding the crank up. What I have got now, though, is what I would call end float in the crank. The crank will slide, completely slide. And it's actually the crank that moves. Because the crank is one-sided, it goes in a bush on what I would call the right-hand side of the engine, this side. I don't know how it maintains its own float, unless it maintains it with the flywheel. That the flywheel going on, because it's threaded, maintains the end float for the piston. I'm not sure. Looking inside, I can see that the crank is attached to one side of the crankcase and the conrod, yeah, that's right. There's only one flywheel and the conrod is attached to one side of the flywheel. Weird. Obviously works and is obviously balanced, or now I've got perspiration in my eyes. It obviously works and is obviously balanced because, you know, that's the way they made it. And it all spins around quite freely now. So the big question is, I'll leave it like this and clean it up and put it all back together and hope for the best. Or do I persevere with this thing? Now, the plug wouldn't move it at all. On the screws, I cut a slot in it and put a piece of steel bar in it, and that wouldn't move it either. Now, I've got that knocked in about, let me see, about 15 mil. Yep, nearly the full depth. It's only about 18 mil deep, or maybe it's 3/4 deep. And I have put so much pressure on that it started to break. So that's a fair bit of effort. Perhaps they had a steel plug that they put in that fitted very, very neatly. I've tried heat on the crankcase. You can see a bit of carbon there, and that didn't help either. I am going to go and see a friend who had one of these and ask for a bit more advice. In the meantime, I'm going to just start cleaning up the crankcases and you know, hopefully doing a better job. Overall, I'm going to call the engine a victory because I think I have a good piston. I think I have good rings. I certainly have a good barrel, and I have what I would call is a reasonable bottom end. How the float all works, I don't know. I just don't know. But you've seen it at the same time as me. Wanted to have a look at the gearbox out of the Velo, mainly because I'm frightened of it. And I'm frightened I don't have what I need. And I'm frightened that I won't be able to find it. And if I'm honest, that's what puts, I believe that's one of the things that puts people off these old projects. They think, oh, I'm never going to find what I'm looking for. I'm going to have this bike forever and it's not going to happen for me. And that's me. I kind of get a bit chicken. I buy them anyway, probably. So I've got what I would call the main shaft out, and it simply slides through from this side and holds the sprocket, which appears to be right. I would call this a lay shaft and the Kickstarter shaft because it's got that on it, and I would have thought that that's for the Kickstarter. And that came out of here. And I believe it's a 2-speed box, and I actually thought there was a gear missing, that the shifter mechanism doesn't move the way it should. But I could be wrong, because sometimes when you get these apart, you actually work out how they work because they're so simple. And, you know, they weren't super complicated. We're talking about 103 years ago. These are relatively rusty, and they could do with a really solid clean-up. I don't really know how all of that works, and I'm going to scratch my head with it for a little while. I think there's some pieces missing. Where will I find them? I don't know. Velocette Club in Melbourne or Velocette Club in the UK. But the first thing to do is to work out, how does it work? What do I have and what don't I have? And there's no guarantee that any of this is correct. So I'm going to continue pulling it apart, and you're going to have a look when I go to depart. What's satisfying is, like, these are pretty good, but when you clean the rust off them and you start to disassemble them, you feel even better about them. So I'm just looking at all this now the way it is in the gearbox, so that I get a chance to work out, well, how did it come apart and how does it go back together. So that was the other way around, was over the top. Right, I should be able to get this gear out now. And I would have thought it was just pressed in. Could be wrong. Brass hammer, so I'm not trying not to damage anything. The bush goes all the way through. There's a dust shield at the bottom. Spins freely. That could be a locking nut on the top, but it's actually where the clutch actuates. Let's see if that'll tap out. Yes, it does move. I'm not just sitting here beating on it. There's a shim in there. We just need to know whether that's threaded or whether that is in fact just pressed. I'm tipping threaded. Or not. Really hard to tell. I'll get a lock on this with in the vise or something. No, maybe I won't. I'll leave it on the bench and see if I can knock it out. Bring you back when I've done some more. Rightio. It's a fine thread. And out it comes. So hopefully this reveals how everything comes apart. Or not. There's a very fine brass shim in there that's very, very worn. Oh, and there's a great big bearing. Cool. So now we know that that's a press fit. And we know that we can give it a tap and out it comes. We also know that on the other side there's another brass shim that sits on the other side of the bearing. We should be able to tap that bearing out and get the whole thing replaced. Winner, chicken dinner. So there's the threaded piece that I just pulled out, and it's these little pieces here that the clutch actually actuates on with an arm. The clutch pulls from one side. Fascinating little thing. Rightio. That should then let us carefully remove that arm. And out it comes, because it's a blind rivet that's been beaten over to hold the change mechanism. And that's in good nick. Gee, that gearbox is nearly empty. Let me see if I can get these pieces off the side so that we could think about maybe a soda blast and a new bearing. Not really sure. Or just a really good clean up. We'll see. Now those screws might have been in there for the whole 100 years. Hard to say. But they're proven a bit persistent to get out. So far, I've managed to make a mess. It wasn't great before I started, so it doesn't matter. Here's the front cover, and I've brushed that, wire brushed that. I need a new wire brush, and give it a clean up. I really think I'd like it soda blasted, if I'm honest. And now that the gearbox is down this far, and I'm going to replace the bearing, there's probably no reason not to. It might just give me a very, very, very clean base to start with. Overall, the gearbox looks all right. The dogs on don't look horribly worn, and nothing looks really awful. I do need to establish whether I've got everything, and that's probably my biggest issue. I don't actually know whether I've got everything, and that sort of distresses me a little bit. But nonetheless, these are the challenges we have. I'm going to lay this out on the bench and see what I've got. All right, one of you might be able to tell me if I'm wrong. Here's the main shaft. Main shaft, 2 gears on it. This is the side that the clutch is on and the drive sprocket's on. So this sprocket is fixed. This sprocket is also fixed. It has a nut that goes over the top and goes inside the gearbox, of course, you know, and it can't go anywhere. It's fixed. Doesn't slide up and down the shaft. It goes to there and it stays there. This is the shaft that in theory moves. And it sits in the gearbox. I'll bring you down onto the bench. We'll explain all this again. One of you that knows a lot, and there are several of you, and I appreciate you, might be able to tell me whether I've got this right. This is what I'm calling the main shaft. And it's all fixed, in my opinion. The sprocket is fixed. The clutch will be fixed. This sprocket cannot move. This goes through the gearbox housing. There's a bearing there. This sprocket cannot move. Doesn't go anywhere. But there are dogs on them. So my initial thought is there's something missing out of the middle. Otherwise, why have a spline shaft and why have dogs on the gears? These gears cannot go anywhere. I thought something slid in the middle and something that went on this selector. However, and then I've got this gear that meshes into here. Or that's where I think it goes. But it can move on the shaft. Does it move up and select a different gear? I don't think so. I still think there's something missing out of the middle. But this fits perfectly in there. And in theory, you could move this gear. I'm confused. I need to go in search of diagrams and exploded diagrams of this gearbox because I still think there's a gear missing. Now, I don't have it. I've looked and I don't have another one, but this is a 3-dog gear and this is a 3-dog gear. Logic says there's something in the middle, but I can't work it out. Any clues? All right, long time coming, but I'm going to call this because I think I know what's happening. I emphasise the I think. Cover. Don't know what screws into here, so leave that with me. This is a Kickstarter. Pull that off. There's 2 gears. That's a gear, and there's a set in the bottom. This is one piece. Not sure why. There's a selector. Now, I don't know that you can see any of this. The selector will go up and down. And it appears to go there. The selector pulls a sprocket between the 2 dogged teeth to give you one gear and another gear. And possibly a neutral somewhere. I don't know. I wish I knew more about gearboxes, but I don't. There'll be a neutral somewhere in the middle there as you lift it out of one gear and into the other. I don't have the gear, which is a bit of a blow. I'm going to have to take some photos and put a little call out on the old interwebs to ask people, has anybody got parts for this gearbox? In the meantime, I'm going to move on. I'm going to lightly grease these parts and loosely reassemble them in the order I think they go. I emphasise, I only think this. I don't know it. Day 2 in the shed, and I've packed up the gearbox. Gearbox has been a success, I think. I don't have a complete gearbox. That's a done question. Last piece of the video, I was talking about this shaft. Now, on this spline section, there is to go a toothless, so no teeth on it, gear with dogs on the back that selects the bottom gear and the top gear. Really nice guy on a Velocette group that has been corresponding with me, who's going to look for one, said they were very hard to find, and that the 2-speed early gearboxes are a bit unusual and a bit rare. Other than that, I appear to have most of a gearbox. So that was a big relief. The gear, well, I'll find it eventually, won't I? In the meantime, I've taken the casings, I've got them put aside. I'm going to drop them off for a little soda blast, I think, just to give them a really strong clean up. So let's put the gearbox aside for now. Got it all in a tub, got it loosely assembled, and that was okay. The other part of the video you saw me struggling with was this thing, which goes in there. Now, it perplexed me. I assumed it was threaded in because this was threaded in. Turns out this is the locking nut that holds that in. And again, the guy with the gearbox sent me some images and some descriptions that said, you know, if you've got compression, spin the engine over without that in, and this will pop out. Now, this was never going to pop out, I can tell you. I don't think it's ever been out. It's covered in grease, really baked on black grease. Now, you saw me trying to tap it out, assuming it was threaded. I made a plug and tried to turn it. In putting the plug in, though, I think I've wedged it even harder. So, what did I do? That is super tight. I came out this morning, used one of my pen turning blanks, and started to tap the top of the cover from the inside. I got a tiny bit of movement, so I grabbed the oxyacetylene torch and I heated the case. Trying not to heat this, but you know what aluminium's like, or aluminum, depending on what part of the world you're in. It transferred the heat relatively quickly, but it was enough to see it to start to move. And you know, now I've got it out. Now you can see the crank has touched the end of it, and the shiny spots on the end of the crank, because the crank comes out this side of the case, but you have to get the conrod out to take it off. Now, I don't actually know that it's worth taking it off. I like the conrod. I think it's okay. I'm actually going to try and clean this engine up, leaving the conrod in, because I think with the wear marks, and I'll show you the wear marks on the end of the crank. It's hard to see. I could do more harm than good, and I don't really want to. I don't want to make a bigger problem. I did want to get this out. I'm not sure why I was so focused on getting it out. I suppose I wanted to see what was going on inside, but I think the conrod's, you know, not worth messing with. There's no up and down on the big end. Makes me wonder whether it's been done before or what's been happening. So I'm going to start cleaning the cases up, and I'm pretty happy with it, if I'd say. I think, you know, to draw this little bit of the engine to a conclusion, to have a piston, a barrel, and a piston and a barrel with rings and at least one brass plug for the end, I feel pretty fortunate. The BSAs are giving me trouble with with pistons and rings. To have all that, I feel pretty fortunate. There are a lot of parts missing. There are a lot of covers missing that I don't know what they do. And I don't know whether the oil pump is missing or how it works, or whether that in fact is the oil pump and the oil pump's encapsulated. I don't actually know how that works, but Velocette were very proud of their internal oil pump, and maybe it's a scavenge feed on a vacuum. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to get all this cleaned up and see what I can find out about the whole thing. In the meantime, this thing is a press fit, just a press fit. Amazing. I don't really know how you get them out or how they would come out other than what I did. Not really sure. I didn't video it because I was bloody frightened of breaking it. And I just tapped away at it for probably 30 minutes, gently, brass hammer, a couple of blocks of wood, tapping away at it and heating it till I couldn't hold on to it. So, bit of a result. I'll put it aside and we'll, I don't know, I'll clean the whole thing up and do a bit better. I'm pretty excited, so I want to show you this. This is a seat cover for my wedge tank. And it's come up pretty well. I got one made out of leather, and the guy who's done my other seats did it for me. We established that it's a Terry seat, and then he did some online research for what did the cover look like, how big was it, where were the seams, the pleats, and all that sort of stuff. Come down the bench and have a look. Looks pretty good. All right, let's start underneath. Of course, I had the frame powder coated. Daryl's put some felt into there, and that looks pretty good. We've got clips over the rails, and they look pretty good too. He actually put some enamel paint where the powder coating was missing and did a good job. And here's the seat. So to me it looks special, to others perhaps not. Now it's slightly short on the nose, but that's the way the photographs show them. Daryl also thinks that this is going to stretch over a period of time and use, and that this will push forward. So we've deliberately left it slightly short. He's riveted the clips on and put the seam in, the tuck seam or expansion seam if you like. It's got a stitched edge across the back with a piping, I suppose you'd call it. The valance, or I don't know, yeah, valance comes down the back and is riveted, the clips are riveted on, and it covers just down to where the spring would go, and it looks pretty good. I'm very, very pleased with it. I have got vinyl covers on other seats and they always look okay, but you know, I think it would have been leather, and I think the cover was well worth the money. It looks special. It's got a very, very, very nice finish to it. I probably shouldn't be putting this seat on, but I really want to see it. I want to see it on. Now, there just isn't enough hands. And there we go. Lining up the frame, the little U-shaped bracket and the seat, and tapping them through is a pain in the bottom. I should have said, I've been experimenting with nickel plating. in the shed here at home. Limited success, that's how I'd describe it. I wanted to do nuts and bolts, so that was the first thing I did, was the bolt off the seat. It came up okay. Let me grab a spring, we'll put a spring under it. I don't need it super tight, so, you know, I'm going to leave it alone. The last thing I wanted to do was to put the tank back on, because I want to see what it looks like. That's a little bit of a fiddle around to get the tank on, so I'll bring you back when I've got it on. Here's the bike. Looks smashing. Absolutely love it. When I think about what I dragged home that day and where I've got to, I'm really pleased. Yes, I have spent some money, but I've got a mountain of spares left over to put into a parts bike to sell on to someone else. So I'm hoping to recover some of my money, you know, because I've got too much in it if I just had one bike. To have two bikes and 4 or 5 engines and bits and pieces, well then it's a real result. So where am I up to? What do I need to do? The engine is being rebuilt as we speak, and the bottom end's been done and the barrel's been honed, and we're waiting for a piston to see if we can get the piston sorted out. I need to get to the nickel platers, and I need the bars, springs, gear change, maybe kickstart, clutch lever, and a few other bits, brake rod, done. I'm not going to go through the roof with it. I just don't think the bike warrants $1,000 worth of nickel. I'm well deep in it. I'm deep enough. I think the bike still is on the positive side, where I'd have less physically in it cash-wise than it's worth. But, you know, if you took labour, then we'd be on the wrong side of the register. Other than that, the bike looks smashing. The guards come up well, the pack rack, the front wheel, and all of that. Come and have a walk around, and you can tell me what you think. Well, here we go. There's that front guard. It looks good. The paint isn't perfect on it. A bit orange peely, but not too bad. But I'm picking at the saw, you know. Very happy with the front guard and the stays and the front stand and the way it pans out. I do need to sort out the front brakes and get that working. Obviously parts for nickel. Those side arms, nuts, bolts, bars, top nut, those sorts of bits can all go for nickel. They'll look really good. There's the nickel plated nuts I put on the tank. I think they come up okay. I was very pleased with those. I did sit there and sand every facet of the nut very, very smoothly. And they always say it's preparation. I had a bracket formed up by the metal forming guy for the front of the tank. Now I've just got a couple of bolts in there while I find 2 more nuts and make a couple of studs. I need to work on fuel taps and that sort of bizzo, but I'm not overly stressed. Engine will come when it comes. I think this needs a flash of nickel. Down here, this bracket, this, nuts, bolts, and I don't think I'll be sorry. I think it'll come up really well. The brake rod, I think I'll get it done. I don't think it'll be the end of the world. The seat springs certainly need done. Now here's the seat on the bike. I'm super happy. I hope you are too. I don't suppose it particularly matters what you think, but it matters to me, I suppose. The seat looks good. Overall, I'm very happy with the bike. I need to work on the primary cover on the other side. I haven't done anything with that yet. We make good progress, but we're not quite there. Go. That's my flat tank journey for the week. Just a couple of days work, but enough for me. I've got a couple of days of other work, and I've got family, and I've got other things to do too. So this is what it's about for me. I've got something done. This is my first video that's a mixed bag. You'll get to see the Velocette engine and that sort of stuff. And then we do a little bit on the BSA, and I mean a little bit. I really only want to put the seat on. The engine's my priority for the BSA, and I'm putting what money I want to dedicate into bikes at this point into getting the engine done. That'll be good. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed it. Think about subscribing to the channel. Thanks to everybody who's subscribed recently. It's been pretty cool. Numbers have gone up. Thanks for that. In the meantime, have a good one. Cheers.